easier to pursue a Diego in 1991 with an English degree, and
Okay.
got a job at the newspaper, and I started covering comics, as a freelance gig, and I covered Comic Con every year, and Jim Lee's Wildstorm studio was the local studio, and I got to know him, and after like a year or two or three of me interviewing them every year, they kind of knew I knew comics, and they hired me on as an assistant editor, and then I became an editor, and then DC bust, and suddenly I was a DC editor, and it was about a 5 year period total, and I I put out about 200 comics, and got to know how comics were made, and got to meet people and make friends, and I'd always wanted to write. So in 2001, I took the plunge to be a freelance writer, and I've been writing ever since.
So
So you've been both sides of the kind of the divide there. You've been an editor for a while. You're now doing the writing side. Do
Yeah,
you
well, even more than
obviously
that,
prefer the writing?
I a designer. There was points when it was hard to get writing work, but I was getting lettering work.
oh,
So I've
Yeah.
lettered, I've done design, I've done production, I've edited, I've done I've done everything but actually drawn a comic.
All the parts of the pie here. Yeah, that's nice.
Yeah.
So,
And
someone who
it
used to be an
really
editor.
helps.
Oh, sorry, there's a delay on my side. That's I'm not trying to talk over you, John. Sorry. Carry on.
Okay. It helps because, as a letterer, I know exactly how many words can go on a page or a panel, which sometimes writers don't. They'll write a ton of words on a little panel, and then an editor has to come back, or a letterer comes back to him and says it won't fit. And between being a letterer and an editor and a writer, it's kind of the perfect synergy of knowing, how to do a page.
Yeah. I was looking through the Chew script book that you put out for, I think it was issue one. So I was looking through that earlier on, and I don't really know much about how a comic is produced. Obviously, like I appreciate them and whatnot, but I've never actually had to write one. And I'm looking through it, and I see that, as you're saying there, like you're a letterer as well, so you know exactly how many words to put on the page. Growing up, like my favorite was Chris Claremont. So when you look at the amount of words he puts on a page, it's
Well,
that.
it was a different time then. I think the
Yeah,
storytelling has changed, and it's a little more artist driven now.
does that mean that, like, see, when you were kind of writing, does
definitely.
that mean that your personal opinion, or well, for me personally, I feel like Chew has a very kind of quick, fast-paced dialogue. Do you think that kind of helped as you were a letterer, so you knew how many words you could fit on a page, so you knew how to set a scene in as few words as possible?
Yeah, but also as an editor, you want as few words as possible, unless because you want the art to guide the story. You don't want to get bogged down. You're not reading Dostoevsky.
That's a
There are
War and
moments
Peace.
you want that. So it's really a matter of finding a balance. And weird when a novelist gets his or her first comic book gig, they tend to overwrite. People who come from other industries, they don't really understand that the picture really is worth 1,000 words.
Does that so see how you're talking about how the idea of obviously kind of being an editor and then kind of coming up through kind of Wildstorm and doing stuff like that. Does like editing someone else's work feel like it has its own kind of almost burden to it?
Yeah, yeah. You learn a lot from, because there's no one way to read to do a script. So um you learn from every other writer. You might be like, "Oh, I like how this person does this. I'm going to do this." And you even learn from bad writers and bad scripts. Uh I mean,
Yeah.
there is one thing I took from a bad writer. He wasn't a good writer, but he did one thing well, and I took that. And then there are other things you're like, well, I want to do that. That doesn't work, and here's why. So it editor, you kind of have to go in very analytically and look at how the sausage is made. And then once you're a writer, it really helps because you've taken the class. You know what goes on behind the scenes, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So with that idea of obviously you're taking these like kind of you take your own kind of opinions and stuff off of kind of other writers and kind of almost kind of would you say you maybe apply it to your own work and stuff like that? Just before I kind of answer this, yeah.
Because like I said, there is no one standard way to do a comic script.
Yeah.
So everyone does it differently. So you're reading Grant Morrison and Mark Miller and Kirk Busiek and Alan Moore and everyone does it differently, and it clearly works for them. So find a way that works for you.
So speaking of the different ways of how to obviously kind of write a kind of a book or like such as an Eisner Award winning series such as Chew, because I'm going to keep saying that because it's such a great book.
Oh, but music in my ears.
You kind of said in the past that you're not a fan of people you asking how you came up with the idea of Chew because it kind of just gestated in your mind.
Because I don't have a good story. I don't know where my ideas come from. The type of writer who will segue into some clever story that they were sitting here and something happened and the idea came to me, but I just tend to be kind of torturous for me. So whatever I went through was probably agony that I don't want to relive.
So
you were sitting in your study one day and a cannibal came flying through the window, and then you realised that criminals are afraid of cannibals, and so you would write a story about a cannibal. And no, that's Batman. That's Batman.
I recall that in my mansion.
and yeah, so your 5-story mansion. So see, instead of me asking about how you came up with the idea of Chew, I'm going to go for kind of this thing of asking, where did you decide to put all these elements into Chew? So rather than the idea, but what caused you to put all these kind of like crime and sci-fi and cannibalism and bloody murder and aliens and cybernetic chickens and stuff? Like where did all those ideas piece together almost? Did they come at once?
Rob Guillory,
Yeah.
the artist, and I are very similar in that I think we get bored easy, and if it was just one straight thing, I think we'd get tired. Like if it was just straight crime, Ed Brubaker and Sean Phillips can do that, and they can do it better than me. I tend to throw more stuff in just to keep myself from getting bored and let the story go in crazy directions, just the way my mind thinks. I don't go in saying
it definitely does that.
What's that?
Same like saying the story go in different directions. Like it definitely does that. It's one of the most insane and funny things that I've ever read. Like I absolutely love it. And I wanted to ask you, this was like just me, like the only question that I've really got. Like Massimo has got like a whole bunch of questions, which I also this is what me for years now. How feel like to be the guy who came up with the best that's ever been put on the page, and by that I mean Pollo.
It's funny because Chew was very planned out, and then Pollo just took the world by surprise, and everyone loved Pollo. And
It's so good.
I put him in, and it's like ratings would spike. Like having a special guest star, like Pollo stole the show.
But it's every issue where like they would just go, no, Agent Pollo somewhere else, and then there was like a 2-page spread of Pollo versus escargot or whoever, and it was just, I was always looking forward to that. Just that those little asides were perfect. And then I know Massimo hasn't quite finished the book yet, so I don't want to spoil it, like where it goes with that particular character. So. I
was gonna say, right, you're gonna throw me on the bus in front of the writer. No, I really have been enjoying it, but I've been taking my time with it because obviously it's a finished series now. So I really like to take my time.
How far are you, if I may ask?
So I am about, I think I'm on volume 7 of 12.
A bad thing happened, right?
Yes, the bad thing. Yes, the bad thing happened. Yep.
That was when, you know, it was funny because the sixth arc was really, I knew the bad thing was going to happen, and it was very light and fun and happy, and people are like, Chew has kind of lost its teeth, and it's like, no, I'm just suckering you into a false security, and then I'm gonna break your heart, and that was really the standout for me when I could do that, which was a really hard thing to write.
Yeah.
All bets were off.
I was going to say, because obviously in that kind of volume 6 of the kind of paperback and of kind of that arc, like, Chew is most of it completely out of it. He's completely unconscious after arc 5. So how do you take a character who's been the main character for 5 arcs so far and then completely spin out his head where he's basically hospitalized? Like, how like did you know you were going to do that and be like, yeah.
It was part of the challenge and the fun, and it wasn't that hard because we had such a good supporting cast. The supporting cast supported the book while the lead was out of it for a while, and that's sort of, I guess, spoke to the strength of the cast.
It's not a lot
Still
often.
have that
Yeah.
character in it.
Yeah. That's what I was going to say.
But that was a little bit ballsy to remove your lead character for this
Mhm.
thing, but you really needed to get invested in the sister, and so
Yeah.
we did.
Yep, and then you gut punching,
We
heart
were.
wrenching. Oh man. Like, so obviously that, like, Chew is like obviously a big part of your writing career. It's like 60 issues long. It's got kind of 12 volumes, several different, omnibus versions, and the kind of charcuterie versions that exist as well. The kind of the smorgasbord, whatever it is.
Sequel right now, right? Or
Yes,
kind of literally a sister book. The sister who was not mentioned in the first because she didn't exist. The criminal sister who was in prison at the time, and we're following her as the food criminal. It's a guy named Dan Boltwood, who's a Brit.
Nice. We love that.
Just gave me. We did an arc. I know COVID kind of messed both of us up, and we took way too long to get the second arc. Solicited next month, and gave me pencils on issue 7, and the second arc's even better than the first arc. So it's fun to be rolling again.
I will get round to that as soon as I finish the main series of Chew, because I've been really enjoying it so far. I don't think my enjoyment's going to stop. And speaking of the idea of, because obviously you said you swap creative teams a little bit with the new kind of the other series. I guess it's also called Chew, so it's like like you kind of swap creative teams. What was it like working with and kind of creating Chew with, is it Rob Gilroy, for 60 issues?
Like, really good relationship, and I struggled to find the same relationship with other artists because Rob and I communicated a lot. We were both on chat server, and we would text a lot, and would bounce ideas back all the time. Dan Boltwood and some of the other artists I work with, they want a script and to go away, and I'm used to sort of having almost like a best friend that I'm like chatting with every day. So it's definitely different. Thing is, Rob Guillory was a really hard worker, and I'm kind of lazy. But he get to a point where he's on like page 15, and I'd realize, well, shit, I've got about a week. I can't leave an artist without work. So Rob would keep me honest. He would work so hard and so fast. I would have to work hard and fast to keep up. I kind of need that because an editor and writer, I've learned that the cardinal rule, the absolute most important thing, is you never leave an artist without work. If an artist, if an artist finishes an issue and they don't have a script, you have screwed up, and it's completely your fault. You're taking bread off your artist's table. They got to feed their family and pay their rent. You have to have script for your artist always.
deliver. So you worked with Tony. Tony, I'm reading the character's name here. You worked with David Guillory for 60 issues plus the kind of one shots and whatnot, and done a whole bunch of other stuff. Obviously, you've done a bunch of work for like Dynamite and IDW, where you were doing like like film tie-ins and not tie-ins. What do you call them? That's terrible.
Licensed products, they're called.
Like licensed properties. Thank you. The words would not come there. So you've done like Xena. You've done Army of Darkness. You've done a whole bunch. Red Sonja. Is it like working? You know, going from like that kind of thing to your own stuff, or back the way? Like, kind of, what do you prefer?
They both are fun. Like with you, you're inventing the wheel, and you're playing God. But it is harder to invent your own world. You know, for writing Godzilla or Xena or Mars Attacks, I'm kind of just being a fanboy and getting paid for it. So, I'm getting paid to write, sequels to stuff I like. And you don't have to build the world, but you have to follow the rules a little more. Like, Xena can't suddenly, kill and eat a bunch of babies. But you
want
if you're
her
a
to, though,
professional,
right?
that going in, you want to do justice to the character for the sake of the fans.
I feel that's a very diligent way of writing, and and it definitely carries over in your work. Yeah. Sorry, you go on.
Sorry. The dream must be to work on Star Wars then, right? Like, seeing as that's the one that brought you into this whole industry.
That I have a bucket list, and Star Wars is continually on it, but that's one I haven't been able to crack yet.
Right, Mr. Mouse, make this happen. Like, come on.
Yeah, I want to do Star Wars. I want to do Archie. I want to do They Live, the old John Carpenter movie.
Oh, great film! It'd be a phenomenal. Yeah.
I've had a bucket list. I'm looking up at my bookshelf now, and I've written Godzilla and Mars Attacks and Army of Darkness and Judge Dredd and Aliens. Like, these are all my favorite things, and like to be able to like say, because I grew up on Judge Dredd, trying to get 2000 AD stuff over in the US, and like to finally get to write Judge Dredd was just such a thrill.
Like, that must be one of those iconic characters. Like I say, you probably wrote on several of them, that like when it comes to that, you might have to take special care handling them because they've got these such big pre-established histories. Like, even with
Godzilla fan. And I know like the brass ring for a lot of people is superheroes, and like it was fun to write Spider-Man and Batman, but like it's equally fun to me to write Godzilla. Like, to me, if you don't own it, it's a licensed property. Like, they don't consider Batman a licensed property, but it is. All superheroes are.
Yeah.
So you're just getting to play with someone else's toys, and it's a lot of fun. But at the end of the day, it's not yours, and there is a satisfaction to the fact that people like my Chew stuff. Is the greatest feeling, because that's 100% mine. Batman's 0% mine.
So you talk about obviously create your own stuff, and you recently wrote The Man Who Effed Up Time for Aftershock, a review which is available on the BGCP website by yours truly. I'm just going to plug myself while I do this. And what was it? First of all, what was it like working with them as a publisher? And also, what was the decision to go for a time travel story?
Well, I've worked with sometimes you work for money, sometimes you work with for the characters, sometimes you work with friends. And the editor at Aftershock, Mike Martz, was the first guy to give me work at Marvel. He gave me Batman. I've been friends for like 20 years, and sometimes he's like, "Hey, you got anything for me?" And it's like, yeah, I got this, goofy time travel thing with a great title. And he's like, tell me more. And so, end of the day, that was really just an excuse to like work with a pal, do something fun that, I own or have a stake, and, get another book on my bookshelf and work with a friend that you trust.
Well, you were saying there about it gave you Batman, which was going to be the next thing I was going to ask you. Sorry, you worked on Batman Eternal. Obviously, you've done a fairly long run on Detective Comics as well, but you did 21 issues or something on Batman Eternal. What was it like working in the kind of writer's room as opposed to, I take it you would normally work on your own in that regard?
It was not for me.
Ooh.
I tend to be a bit of a lone wolf, and a page would come in, and every single writer would have to like comment, "Oh, this looks great," and it would like I would get 50 emails a day, and it's just like,
yeah, that sounds a nightmare.
I like all the guys, and it was interesting, but like I'm most comfortable working by myself in a cave. No one talk to me, nobody bother me, and this was the opposite of that. And actually left Eternal. I was falling behind on Chew, and again, the cardinal rule is you don't leave your artist without work. And Batman's great, but it'll always be there. And if I screw it up, I screw up my gravy train. That's mine. So I had to pick between Batman and Chew, and I went with Chew.
Good call.
Yeah, I was going to say right choice.
Definitely a good call.
It wasn't an easy choice, and a lot of people like that. There are people who I won't name, you can probably figure out, who have abandoned their creator-owned books for the steady paycheck of Marvel or DC, and that's their decision. But like I'm an indie guy first and foremost, and there is no superhero that means more to me than my own book.
I'm the same way. Like, obviously, I don't write that; I read them. But more interesting to read your work on Chew or Ed Brubaker and Sean Phillips' work on Criminal, just because we put him up earlier, than it is Ed Brubaker on Captain America, which I loved, but he's definitely constricted there. What he can do, like you said, it's someone else's toys you're playing with, right? But if you can do anything, you can go anywhere. It's better.
I don't know if you've been following this story that's hit, where Ed's not really getting paid for
Falcon and Winter Soldier,
and the Disney, and it's like, I'm sure he made some good money on Captain America, and I made good money on Batman, but Chew and Criminal is a very small pie, but we own the entire pie.
thing. Yeah.
Batman, Captain America is this giant pie that you get a few crumbs of.
It must be like incredible though to think that you have this legacy almost that exists, that have like basically Chew is like a cult book, same as those cult films that come before it and stuff like that. Yeah. And how does it feel almost being like one of those kind of like almost a John Carpenter-esque figure in comics, where you've made this book that is kind of like now I consider a cult classic?
I mean, it's cool, and the good thing is, like, Chew continues to sell. Like, even 4 years after it ended, I'm still getting checks, which that's perfect. But on the other hand, you're the guy who wrote that great book that ended 4 years ago, and you sort of have to like look at like, well, I don't know that I'm ever going to do anything bigger than this, so you just got to keep trying keep doing stuff you like. Recognizing, I don't want to say you've peaked, but maybe commercially you're not going to have as big a hit as you have had.
Kind of obviously speaking about stuff that is you're trying to make that's kind of more recognizable and stuff like that. I got the chance obviously because we were given a bunch of your books to read and review before we kick into review, so we're kind of versing your stuff, and one of the ones that really caught my eye was Outer Darkness. And
Oh, you're gonna break my heart here.
I know. This is the thing: is that Outer Darkness. I was reading it, and I was like, okay, sci-fi. How's it gonna do it? And then I read it, and I'm like, oh my god, this.
No, that was,
Yeah, this book is like, it's so much more than the surface, and I feel like, and if you don't mind me saying that, because of like almost the like how it looks like every other sci-fi book, but the story is so good and so diverse and so different from anything else, so subversive even. Like I feel like, yeah, like it was. Honestly, it was a great read. Sorry, I don't want to cut you off, but yeah, I just
was the book like that was supposed to outdo Chew and be better than Chew, and like that was supposed to be the book that I was remembered for forever, and it didn't even get an ending.
It honestly could have been, because I read the first volume, and like obviously I know there's one more other volume to read, but I was hooked, and I feel like I totally agree with you, and obviously because it's by Skybound and stuff like that, which who I was reading into it, and the way it works is they own the Outer Darkness, yeah. So you couldn't even continue if you decided to wanted to, which is the sadder part of it.
So it was a lesson learned. I actually kind of thought I was doing them a favor, like, hey, I'm bringing you my next big book, but Chew, you want to talk about big pies and crumbs, like Chew is nothing compared to Walking Dead, and so sort of in the scope of their empire, I mean, they liked the book, but it was just another book. And when they pulled the plug right before COVID lockdown, it really hurt. Like, I would have at least liked them to say, hey, one more arc to wrap things up, and just didn't happen. So, can't win them all.
Sorry to bring up painful memories, man.
Yeah.
And it would. I was in a fetal ball for the first half of quarantine, just saying why, and fortunately, like the new Chew book has sort of helped, drag me out of it. But I think I'll ever whatever my next big book is, it will be with Image Central, so I can do it on my own terms.
There you go.
If we'll do small self-contained things with Aftershock and IDW, but if you want to be the master of sort of your own domain and call the shots, you got to go with Image Central, because work a lot harder, but you have 100% control of what to do.
I don't want to bring up more painful memories, and hopefully this won't kill you even more, John. Is that obviously I know Alan's giving me all the looks. And I really hope this isn't pretty much is obviously. So Chew was touted at one point as being an animated TV show. With
that died, and then there was another deal that nobody ever heard of, that was behind the scenes, and it died. And I'm actually glad it did, because it was so terrible that I was actually rooting against.
Wow.
I was afraid that the network was going to pick it up and I'd hate it. So, could anything else happen? And should there be another deal in the future, Rob and I will be heavily involved this time, because I'm never going to risk someone picking it up like the last people did. Being said, I can't talk about it right now.
Okay, that's entirely fair. Yeah. Wink, wink. Wink. We love that.
Yeah, Hollywood people are always circling for stuff, especially with The Boys and Invincible.
That's
Umbrella Academy.
That's one of the things I was going to say was the idea that obviously Chew, being such a big, massive book, and obviously Invincible with obviously Stephen Ewan at the front of as the main character kind of being released, that now more than ever is maybe the time where Chew could definitely be on the cards, in my opinion. But for yourself, say the idea that like Hollywood circling looking for these great animated or even live action comic book shows that are subversive and different.
Well, completely agree. Now more than ever, I learned a lot of lessons from the past, and it's all I can say right now, other than Stay tuned.
Stay tuned. We love that.
One thing that is not a painful memory right now.
Ooh.
I can only say this question happy. Good at that.
Well, you haven't heard it from us first. You definitely haven't heard it here in any capacity whatsoever about.
There's always things percolating behind the scenes. Like I said, there was a deal that went on for like 3 years after the cartoon, and then it fell apart, and I learned some valuable lessons from that. And that, that's the thing about comics. You're always going to make mistakes, and things are never going to turn out the way you planned. You just try to not make the same mistake twice.
It's probably good advice for any walk of life.
It really applies to comics.
And I feel like sorry, I don't want to cut you off, but like I feel like I said, like the idea, like you like learn all these lessons through comic books, and you learn all these lessons that kind of apply to other aspects of your work. Like, is there like, and obviously we talked about it a little bit earlier on about the sentimentality that maybe exists with your work, the kind of the smaller pie, but it's all of yours. Does that apply to kind of maybe other stuff that you would work on? Like, say, for example, if you got to create like a TV show or like a novel or whatever, would you feel like those things hold the same value?
Well, I am a comic book writer first. Everything else is on the, like, all I've ever aspired to be is a comic book writer. So the other stuff is, gravy. But I have worked, I've worked in video games, and as a writer, and there's, video games cost millions of dollars to make, and there's a lot of chefs in the kitchen. Like, for Chew, the chefs in the kitchen were Rob Guillory and me. So we had so much control, and the bigger the scope, the bigger the operation, the less control you have, because everyone's sticking their nose in. So there's a TV show, a game, a movie, I already know that a voice, not the voice. And there's a satisfaction to doing comics, which is why I letter my own stuff, and I like to go with people who color their own stuff, because a 2-person operation is, I can't draw, so that's as close as a one-man band as I'm gonna get. Also cheap, and so splitting the money in 2 is better than splitting the money with a bunch of people.
Video games there, just kind of as you were saying, so you used to do that. How was that? You prefer comics because it's just the smaller team then, or?
The money was real good, but I would spend hours and weeks writing, a cutscene or a mission or whatever, and then it would just end up on the cutting room floor. Like, it wouldn't even see the light of day. And I had, a full-time, 40, 50 hour a week job for a while in video games, and maybe 20% of the stuff I wrote made it into the game, and never as pure as you wanted it. When it's a comic book, it's just between me and the artist, and maybe the editor, and depending, like, worst case scenario, you're on a company book with an editor and an assistant editor and a letterer and a colorist and a production. Like, it's still an 8-man operation, which is a lot smaller than a TV show or a video game. An intimacy to comics where you can really get your vision out there. But probably the only thing that's better is being a writer. I mean, like a novelist, because that's just one person. But I have too short of attention span to write prose. I like drawings.
Pretty pictures.
Yeah, same.
Yeah. It must be that so, like, obviously you say obviously, like, you're a comic book writer, first and foremost at the end of the day, in your own opinion. So with that being said, is there anyone that you said you have kind of a bucket list? Is there anyone else that you maybe haven't mentioned already, kind of within the normal realm of comics, that you would like to work on as a writer? Any characters, any series, any kind of like
that? Well, the great thing about like my Marvel work, I have touched. I don't have any Marvel bucket list characters because Marvel versus Army of Darkness, like I got to like at least touch everybody. With DC, I got to write Swamp Thing this year, and I got to write Hellblazer. Just little 8-pagers, but at least I can say, those were bucket list characters. And think of big two. All I've got is maybe Harley Quinn and Firestorm. There's a few other, like I got to write Plastic Man this year. He was on my bucket list forever. And that's enough for me. Like, hey, I got to write an 8-page Swamp Thing Batman story drawn by Dennis Cowan. Like, that's freaking awesome.
Yeah.
And in terms of other creators, like a lot of times, the man who effed up time with Aftershock, I didn't know the artist. It was a blind date, and I don't mind that. You end up making a lot of friends that way. Sometimes I bring an artist to the table. Sometimes I get set up, but I think 95% of the time I get along with the artist and come out with a friend and a future collaborator. So it's been great.
5% then, who didn't you like?
Well, I can only think of one instance where an artist and I didn't really hit it off, and it wasn't really that bad, but the great majority of the time is I get along, and I'm just grateful to have somebody drawing my words.
Like, I can dig it. Just being cheeky there.
I mean, there are channel creators who don't get along, and I know that there are feuds, but I've been real lucky, and I'm pretty easygoing. And also, as an editor, somebody might draw something that you don't completely like it wasn't completely what you envisioned. Sit back and I'd be like, well, could ask for a change, but is any reader going to notice? Is it going to affect anybody's enjoyment of the book? And 99% the answer is no. And let it go. It's a collaboration. Not everything's going to be your vision. An editor, I worked with this one pain in the ass writer, and he'd be like, well, the artist drew this guy wearing a wristwatch on his left wrist, and this guy's more of a right brain guy. I think the wristwatch should be on the other wrist. And I'm like, dude, I'm not gonna ask for that sort of change. No reader is gonna care, and all you're gonna do is piss off your artist. What is the point of a stupid change like that? And that's a very extreme circumstance, but sometimes you don't get what you expect, and you unless it affects the story, my advice is to live with it.
You were saying there about not kind of pissing off your artist. I always go back to when you see things written about Jim Shooter and John Byrne, and when John Byrne jumped ship to DC, and he was Guy Gardner basically murdered him. The artist, he's going to show you in his book having something really bad happen to you, so it just doesn't make sense.
It's different for corporate comics because they're so connected now to like movies and TV, and talk about a lot of chefs in the kitchen. Like, I feel sorry for any Marvel writer right now, because they have to use all these masters.
The master of all, Mickey Mouse, just
yeah.
Well, that must be kind of like a freeing experience as someone who has worked like kind of in writers' rooms and kind of worked in independent comics. And with that being said, is there anyone who maybe kind of inspired your work or inspires the kind of things you do in the world of comics, or kind of as a writer? Like, is there any way you could pinpoint as like maybe when you were younger, like just not even just specifically like as we talked about Star Wars and stuff like that, just writers who were like, that's the kind of thing I want to be writing. That's who I want to write like.
Oh, I don't think I ever wanted to write like him, but I I really like. I think Warren Ellis is my favorite comic book artist. I mean, writer, and I got to work with him on Planetary with John Cassaday, which is an absolutely brilliant book, and to read Warren's scripts, and I'm a Warren Ellis fanboy, first and foremost, and not everything, but if it's got his name on it, I tend to check it out, and I didn't his career necessarily, but there's certainly been times where I've looked at him and I want to be my own type of Warren Ellis, if that makes sense.
Like being the obviously being individual, but also kind of having that same kind of iconic nature to your work is what you're kind of.
I can rattle off probably 4 or 5 writers who want to be Grant Morrison in the worst way. I mean,
Yes.
They rip off Grant Morrison and like they end up just writing Grant Morrison light. I never tried to write Warren Ellis comics because there's already a Warren Ellis, and frankly, there's already a Grant Morrison who does it better than all the Grant Morrison lights. So find your own thing.
Definitely. The point of being an imitator, right? It doesn't make any sense unless you're like the best imitator, in which case you're probably going to get some work through that. But my questions was going to be when you mentioned it there. Oh, sorry, so carry on.
I think it's easier for an artist to maybe start off as a Frank Quietly ripoff or an Art Adams ripoff, and then sort of find their own style. But I think when a writer does it, it's way more, I guess, obvious, and I just feel like a writer should find their own.
Yeah, I mean it's kind of hacky, is maybe the way that people would look at it, isn't it? Like, sorry, you're just taking the best bits of him and making something good. So why bother? We'll go and read his stuff instead. Yeah. I don't know. Exactly. Artists, they find their own style over time, and it's fine.
Well, look at somebody like Ryan Sook. Ryan Sook has had his own. There was a time where he really was like a Mignola style, and then he has found his own style, and he is utterly brilliant. There are different artists who are clearly inspired by Quietly, like Nick Patera and my man who effed up time artist Carl Mostert and Ramon Villalobos, and but they've all kind of started with Frank as kind of like their ground, and then they go off and find their own thing, and it's fine to show your influences, just don't completely rip somebody off.
Yeah, don't be slavish to them, kind of thing. Yeah, definitely. I'm trying to. Frank Miller obviously started out with a more traditional style, but over the years it just became completely his, and now you've got folk imitating more of that and kind of going their own way with it. But yeah, it's not where these progressing. We were talking about this the other day with artists, and John Romita Jr. has moved back to Marvel from Image. Folk I've had arguments with the years about how they just go, oh, I can't stand his work, and I'm like, guy drew some of the best X-Men stuff way back in the days. His Daredevil with Frank Miller was unbelievable, like his stuff now, but it's just he's evolved and it's not your taste. It's
I also
nothing
think
stays the same, right?
Fledgling comic book readers don't kind of appreciate there are certain people who are brilliant, but it takes a while to see it. And he's one of these people. Like if you know comics,
Jack Kirby.
there's some people who give it a superficial look. They don't like it so much.
Do you think that's an issue with comics nowadays? Is that for a lot of readers, because obviously there's so much going on with like this event, this reboot, this, that, or the other, whatever crisis on whatever, this, that, or the other. Do you think that's an issue that people kind of suffer where they get hooked in by like a big event, and then when they go and branch out and read older stuff, that then they're maybe not as appreciative of previous
sure,
artists and creators?
sure.
Yeah.
No, the Marvel and DC, I feel like is sort of a gateway drug, and they're you either get stuck, eventually give it up, or you evolve into better stuff. And those are the lifetime readers, the people who like started with these things, but then learn that they're not necessarily going to get a bang for their buck. Spending $90 on a useless event. And it's better to follow a creator than it is a publisher or characters. You'll get more
100%.
satisfaction ultimately.
Yeah. Percent. Massimo, you're obviously like a Batman guy, right?
I like my Batman. I'm more of a Superman boy, but yeah, I do like my Batman.
Okay. Right, like, so back in the day, I was X-Men. It was X-Men. That was all my stuff. If Chris Claremont was writing it and it featured a mutant, I was reading it. Like, that was my stuff. Nowadays, they get excited about DC stuff. Like there's like the occasional books like Ram V's Swamp Thing I'm really, really excited for, and things like that. I'm more interested in what's coming out for Dark Horse, Image. Your freedom
Marvel
to do
and
what you
DC
want.
will always have some good stuff, but the people buying every Marvel comic or DC, like, you can't even afford to. You can barely afford to buy every Batman comic in 1 month. There's so much.
Yeah, for me personally, like I'm quite a younger. I'm a few years younger than Alan is, and I'm like kind of like I'm not fairly new to comics. I've been reading I've been reading since I was like kind of like 6-7 years old, like Spider-Man and all that stuff. But as I kind of gotten older, like I totally agree that like these independent studios and these independent, it's following as you say like a creator or a writer, an artist is the way to do it, because like comics are there's such an issue with it's almost like they're too expensive to get into as a hobby. Like yeah, it's
a problem because like trade waiting is much more like, as a writer, I want you to read my floppies because that pays my monthly power bill and puts food on the table. But in the long run, the real money is in trade paperbacks. I make much better money from having 12 volumes of Chew than from individual issues in the long run. But you have to get to that point. I don't know how you do it being a mainstream big two guy, because it's like swimming against the tide. It never ends, and as soon as you've paid all the money for one event, there's another event, and it's 25 books you got to buy.
So are you a big fan of, unless I don't know, this is a weird kind of tying question, are you a big fan then of stuff like the MCU or kind of what DC's doing, like these kind of big kind of team up comic book movies and all that stuff? Are you not like, no?
Oh, I've got a 14-year-old, and so watch all the Marvel stuff together. We'll sit down and watch Captain America and the Falcon together. I mean, Falcon Winter Soldier.
It's too long. We've had this conversation a lot of times in our podcast group. Is the name of that show is way too long for it to be.
Yeah, I didn't watch Zack Snyder's Justice League. Like, I already know I'm not gonna like it, and that's not for me. And so I don't slavishly watch everything. I watched WandaVision after the whole thing had aired, where I could just binge through the whole thing because it kind of annoyed me, and I didn't want to wait week to week. I don't know I think I'm more of a casual fan of that stuff. but it's a lot easier to pay $6.99 for Disney Plus than it is, to buy 20 Marvel comics at $5.99. I'd much rather buy Johnny Cates's crossover than I would, whatever his Marvel books are. Jeremy, I've
I'm
lost
the same,
you.
definitely.
Oh, you're back. You guys were cutting out for a while.
Oh, sorry about that. I was gonna say though, but like all that, like I do saying like you're only paying $6.99 for Disney Plus or whatever, or your Netflixes with whatever series is on there, like Superhero Wars, like Umbrella Academy and stuff. The fact that obviously we kind of live in this world where everything's digital and stuff like that, and as you said, you're talking about the idea of like floppies versus paperbacks. Do you think it's a step in the right direction for stuff to go online through like services like Comixology as a writer, or is it more for you? You'd prefer people were kind of going single issue, or is
I'm an old guy and I didn't really believe in digital comics, but I'm watching my royalty checks, and I can't deny that it's a force and a factor. And I would say about a third of my comic income is now digital. So, uh, I don't care how you read my books. I don't care if you trade weight. I don't care if you floppy. I don't care if you're digital. Like, uh, I don't really love the pirates. I'm just happy you're reading the book. So, I don't care. I don't care if you buy the hardcover. Like that's the thing. Like, I tend to be the guy that when I find a book I love, I buy the most expensive, oversized hardcover I possibly can. But I think there's so many options of being a reader that anyone can, read a comic the way they want to. So, the right answer.
Was for a second there. Wasn't sure if you still had me. Uh,
Cut in
that's
and
not
out a
what
lot,
else you
Alan.
got. Yeah, sorry, I've got a really bad connection. It's almost dial-up bad. Like that's how bad it is. So I'm sorry. Massimo, take it away, man.
no worries. I was honestly with that kind of being said, with how you're talking about there's not a right way to read a comic. I, I have to obviously applaud you, because from what I've read so far, like you seem to have like whenever you're writing any comics or whatever, whether that be Chew, Our Darkness or the kind of the new Chew series, like you seem to always manage to like have like a diverse cast of characters. And I feel like that's something that, like, how do you come to the kind of the gestation of a character in your head? So obviously, like, most of the Chew being in, Asian American and stuff like that, and Colby being, kind of like part of the kind of LGBT community and stuff like that. Like, how do you come to those ideas for those characters? Is it just something kind of naturally, or do you kind of like put the effort in to make sure that like everyone has someone to relate to in the comic?
Well, I don't like in Chew, obviously, like his family,
Yeah.
was Asian, and it was funny when Chew first came out in 2009. I was meeting with Hollywood people, and they're like, "Well, we like this, but Asians can't sell. We might have to make him Tony Chewinski." And and like both Rob Guillory and my head exploded. And they have come around so much that like, oh, you've got an Asian lead, that's awesome. I think it helped. Like, Rob Guillory is a black guy, and you know, um, I wouldn't specify race, so he would just kind of naturally, unless there was a real story point, he would just kind of draw faces, different types of people, and worked with the Canadian once, and he drew everyone white. And I don't think he meant to. I just think that the area he lived, that's all he saw was white faces. And eventually I had to tell him, hey man, mix it up a little bit just for the sake of things. I know, you know, your little province in Canada is probably pure white, but the rest of the world isn't.
White as snow, just the small part of Canada. That
Because I've been doing this for a while, and I think comics has sort of caught up to it. And like when Chew first started coming out, like there there was a real big Asian readership, and they were happy that they weren't like, you know, a martial artist or like Tony's just a dude
yeah,
that happens to be Asian. Like you know, so many Asians are either like mystical martial arts or mystical, you know, whatever, or
yeah.
martial arts that like have it was kind of refreshing, and so many people would come up to me at cons and just be like, you know, thanks. And guess I sort of realized as a, you know, as a fat white guy in a black t-shirt, you know, there's a trillion of us in comics anyway, so let other people be seen, and it makes a big difference.
To me, it's again white guy, the whitest guy in the world, kind of going a bit red, obviously. But I don't understand folk getting upset over a little bit of diversity, inclusivity. It's nice to see something that looks a bit more like the real world out there on the page, rather than
The, the
everything
real
looking as if it
world,
was made in 1962.
the real world is getting less white, and like I didn't understand it either because like, okay, there's a girl Wolverine now, or there's a black Iron Man. It's like some of these people were getting so pissed, and it's like Tony Stark's still there, you know,
Yeah,
Logan's still there. It's just this is just another option for people.
It's
Like
not erasing like the character from history entirely. It's not completely wiping them off the board or wiping them off the map. It's just adding to the mythology of the character, right? I completely agree. Where it's like as you said, it's more about the real world and Chew does like a phenomenal job of having like lots of satire and there's some nice kind of bits and pieces of kind of parody of kind of pop culture in there. Like there's some definitely I saw some was like some of the issues I was reading was like definitely inspired by pulp fiction. Some of this stuff, kind of kind of Tarantino
our
films.
Tarantino issues, like you know
Yeah,
our homage covers. There was one point I have a super fan in Los Angeles, and she was going to a speaking engagement where Tarantino was going to be there, and we had a cover coming up, which was another parody cover, and she wanted to show it to him. I'm like, do it. We ran the last one because it's better to ask for forgiveness than permission.
mission. Yeah,
So don't bring it to his attention. You know, he may be cool, but maybe his lawyers aren't.
or maybe the
So
executives Warner Brothers or whoever produced the film or whatever.
the fan, like, you know, I appreciate what you're trying to do, but this could conceivably cause trouble. Please don't.
So this is what I was just going to ask you about as well, because obviously we kind of touched on it earlier how there's the new Chew series coming out. So the world of Chew is something that I from what I've read has so many different avenues you can go down, and I looked into it as well. I spoiled some of the stuff for myself, which was unfortunate, but it was the necessities of having an interview. Does it feel like the world of Chew can keep going for a long time? Do you feel like it's something that you feel like you would be happy to continue and just new characters, new facets of this world, or is there an
So
obvious endpoint?
something I didn't kind of because I pitched Chew a lot and nobody wanted it, which is why I ended up doing it myself, and I own it, and that's fantastic. But things about Chew that I think sort of made it as popular it is the universality of food. Like Chew in 12 different languages, and I don't care what culture you're in, you know, what part of the world, like you can relate to a terrible meal. You can relate to a delicious meal. You've had food poisoning. Like everyone has to eat, and like everyone can relate to Chew on some kind of level. So, you know, first book was food cop
Yeah,
is food criminal, and and you know it was weird because once I figured out Chew was a food comic book, like it became like this like impossibly deep canvas to work from. because it's part of every single human's existence. I
That's
can go on for
ours.
people are eating.
Yeah. I was gonna speaking of the idea of like all these like making a food based comic book. Did the idea of like Tony being the pronounce is like Chiopath or Chibapath, can never pronounce it properly. Like, but all these kind of like different food based abilities, did they kind of gestate from Tony being this one particular thing of what if a guy could sense where foods come from, and then what happens if he has flesh, and then what happens if this happens, and or did they kind of like did you all have this ideas of like you wanted to include these tropes of like the idea like of a vampire
I had a
and stuff
bunch
like
of
that?
different ideas. Like I had like a little like idea binder that seemed kind of dumb on their own, and then I realized I had like a bunch of them that were food, and it's like, oh, why don't I just combine them? And again, as soon as I figured out, food comic, it became this rich thing, and the stories just keep coming, and so choose in 12 languages, and I spent a lot of the last few years before the plague traveling to different shows. Like uh, as a writer, you know, I'm selling $10, $15 trades. Like if you're an artist, you're doing $100 of commissions, and you're coming home with loads of money. If you're a writer, you don't make that much money. So if I'm going to a con, I would rather go to Glasgow than Detroit. I'm only going to make a few $100 anyways. Go somewhere and exotic and experience new things. So one of the things to the new Chew comic, uh, the first Chew, Tony Chew's adventures largely took place in America. Because I have to keep the sister separate, she's going to be an international criminal.
Ooh.
So I'm going to have her every arc. She's in a different country, which is fun for me, and it's fun for my foreign publisher because I get to set them in countries that publish Chew.
I'm excited to have you over in Glasgow now.
That's also believe me, I'm thinking about that. Um, I think our biggest foreign publisher is our French publisher. So in the next Chew arc, the sister Saffron Chew goes to Paris to steal expensive wines.
Oof.
And I fully expect a trip to Paris in the future when the book comes out in France. So also it just makes it fun.
Full
Who
of good
doesn't
food as
want to
well.
be
So
who doesn't want to be an international criminal?
Let me write about Rome and Italy, and let's also write about this really nice place.
You're not wrong.
So I think we've had you on long enough, John. It's been a pleasure talking to you. Would you?
Let me pimp a couple things before I go.
Yep. That's what I was just about to ask you. If you got anything you want to recommend, anything you want to plug, just whore them out wherever they are.
Definitely slowed things down. I've got 2 books coming out, and they're both coming out on July 21st. We've got the new Chew arc, which takes place in France. Chew 6 through 10 starts in July, and then I've got a new creator-owned book called Bermuda with Nick Bradshaw coming through IDW, and it's kind of a commandy Tarzan book, and the art is just staggering. And basically everyone who goes through the Bermuda Triangle in history ends up in this island, and it's a teenage girl finds a castaway from our world, and she's showing him the ropes in this island populated by dinosaurs and pirates and black magic, and it's YA. Like, I'm not writing it for kids, but it's all ages appropriate. Coming in July from IDW, and it's supposed to come out a couple of years ago, and it was delayed, because of COVID. But it was really because the art is so staggering. You'll understand why it's taken Nick Bradshaw a couple of years to do 4 issues. I mean, it's next level stuff.
sold.
And
Like,
other than
what was it
that,
called
I'm
again?
just working on. It's called Bermuda, as in the Bermuda Triangle. Other than that, I'm working on some stuff that I can't talk about.
Of course.
I hope becomes public soon. I would hope it becomes public within the next couple months. And if you guys ever want to talk about it, I'm happy to.
Of course, we obviously
have you back.
Yeah, we'd absolutely adore to have you back whenever that unspecified thing that we absolutely know nothing about is going to be coming out. But thank you so much for joining us, John. So thank you everyone for listening to the BGCP podcast interview special with John Layman. You can find us on Facebook at BGCP Comic Con, and also with Twitter with the same handle, as well as on the BGCP website, where you can find all the latest news, reviews, and comic book news. Thank you so much for joining us, John, and everyone have a great weekend. Goodbye.
With me.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you for listening to Disassembled. You can find more news and reviews on BigGlasgowComicPage.com. And don't forget, you can also find us on Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube as BGCP Comic Con. Make sure you also subscribe on your podcast provider of choice for new episodes every week.